A man in rural Australia runs a business without a license. No permits, no inspections, no regulatory fees. He has been doing it for 12 years. The government knows they do not care. And that is not even the most free place on this list. While Sydney residents pay $1.2 million or a shoebox apartment, register every business activity, and navigate 47 different permits just to renovate a bathroom, there are corners of Australia where those rules simply do not apply. Not because people are breaking the law, but because the infrastructure to enforce it does not exist. These are Australia's forgotten territories. Places so remote, so economically irrelevant, that the government apparatus just gave up. No speed cameras, no parking inspectors, no council regulations telling you what color you can paint your fence. But here's what nobody tells you about freedom. It comes with a price tag most people are not willing to pay. One of these places has no doctor within 400 kilometers. Another requires you to generate your own electricity because the grid does not reach. And in one location, if your house catches fire, you better hope you know how to use an extinguisher because help is not coming. Today, we are counting down from number 10 to number 1, the most forgotten, most free territories in Australia. Places where government oversight is a luxury nobody can afford, and personal responsibility is not a philosophy, it is survival. If you are tired of regulations strangling every aspect of your life, hit subscribe. Because by the end of this, you will know exactly where Australians go when they decide the system is not worth participating in anymore. Let's get into it. Number 10, the Outback pastoral leases, where zoning does not exist in central Queensland. There are pastoral lease territories covering millions of hectares where traditional zoning laws are functionally irrelevant. These are not national parks. They are private operations so vast that local councils do not have the resources to monitor them. Want to construct a second dwelling for workers? Nobody is checking. Need to modify structures without permits? The nearest building inspector is 6 hours away and probably will not make the trip. One station owner told researchers he had been operating a side business processing bush materials for 8 years before he even thought to ask if he needed permits. When he finally called the council, they told him they had no record of his property improvements from the last decade and did not plan to start now. But here is the catch. You are 300 kilometers from the nearest hospital. Your internet comes from satellite with 800 millisecond lag times. And if something goes wrong, emergency services measure response time in hours, not minutes. Freedom means you handle your own problems because help is not an option. Number 9, Coober Pedy, the underground city with its own rules. Coober Pedy is famous for opal mining and underground homes. But what tourists do not see is how the town operates outside standard regulatory frameworks simply because enforcement is impossible. 70% of residents live in hand-carved dugouts. No building codes govern underground construction. No inspections verify structural integrity. You dig, you reinforce, you hope your engineering is sound because if your ceiling collapses 15 meters underground, no insurance is covering that. The town is businesses operating from residential dugouts without commercial zoning. Home workshops, unregistered repair services. Cash economies that never touch a tax return. One long-term resident runs a fabrication business from his underground garage. He has never registered as a commercial entity. The council knows, they see his work vehicles. But with a population of 1,700 spread across a lunar landscape, enforcement is not feasible. Water is trucked in, power is expensive, medical facilities are basic. You want freedom from regulation, you get it. But you also get summer temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius and infrastructure from the 1970s that nobody has funding to replace. Number 8, the Gulf Country, where police visits are annual events. The Gulf Country in far north Queensland contains some of Australia's most isolated cattle stations. Properties so remote that police visits happen once per year during routine patrols, if at all. This is not lawlessness, it is absence of enforcement capacity. Stations operate under their own internal rules because external authority is 8 to 12 hours away on dirt roads that become impassable during wet season. Disputes get resolved locally, regulations get interpreted flexibly, and activities that would trigger immediate intervention in urban areas just happen because nobody with enforcement authority will ever see them. One station covering 400,000 hectares has 6 permanent residents. The nearest police station is 220 kilometers away with 2 officers covering a patrol area the size of Belgium. Response time for non-emergency calls is measured in days. You can live however you want out here. The trade-off is isolation so extreme that medical evacuation requires helicopter services that cost $15,000 per flight. And during the wet season, you might be cut off completely for 4 months. Number 7. Cape York Peninsula. Where roads are optional, Cape York Peninsula is technically part of Queensland, but practically it operates on frontier rules. During the dry season, it is accessible with serious preparation. During the wet season, it is cut off entirely. Communities here function with minimal government services because providing them is logistically impossible. Want to start a business? There is no shopfront to inspect. Want to modify your property? The council representative visits twice a year. One indigenous community runs a tourism operation that would require 23 different permits and licenses in urban Australia. They operate with verbal agreements and handshake deals because the regulatory infrastructure to formalize everything does not reach this far north. But the cost is real. Fuel is $3.50 per liter when you can get it. Food arrives by barge or air freight, doubling grocery costs. And cyclones regularly wipe out infrastructure, with rebuilds taking years because contractors will not travel this far for small jobs. This is freedom from bureaucracy, but it is also freedom from reliable electricity, telecommunications, and supply chains most Australians take for granted. Number 6. The Tanami Desert settlements. Beyond telecommunications, the Tanami Desert straddles the Northern Territory and Western Australia border. Settlements here exist beyond reliable mobile coverage, beyond NBN rollout plans, beyond the infrastructure that connects modern Australia. Communication happens via satellite phone or HF radio. Internet is slow, expensive, and unreliable. Government services are delivered by circuit workers who visit every 6 to 8 weeks. This creates an environment where traditional regulatory oversight is impossible. Business licensing, building permits, vehicle registrations, all of these systems assume connectivity and regular monitoring. Out here, neither exists. One community runs a mechanical workshop that services mining vehicles and pastoral equipment. No certifications displayed. No regulatory compliance audits, no work-safe inspections. The nearest regulatory authority is 600 kilometers away and visits never. You want your vehicle fixed, you pay cash, and the work either holds or it does not. Reputation is the only regulation that matters because there is no authority to appeal to anyway. But the price, summer temperatures hit 45 degrees Celsius regularly. Water is scarce, medical facilities are non-existent. If you have a heart attack, your survival depends on whether the Royal Flying Doctor Service can reach you in time. Number 5. The Barkly Tablelands. Where borders mean nothing, the Barkly Tablelands stretch across the Northern Territory and Queensland border. Property boundaries here are so vast and borders so arbitrary that jurisdictional authority becomes meaningless. One cattle station straddles the NT Queensland border. The homestead sits in the Northern Territory. Half the operation is in Queensland, which government has regulatory authority. In practice, neither bothers because enforcement costs exceed any potential revenue. This creates gaps where activities happen outside both jurisdictions effectively. No one is responsible because everyone assumes someone else is. Station owners operate with remarkable autonomy. They build, modify, and conduct business without seeking permits because the system is too broken to even know where to send the application. But autonomy cuts both ways. When a worker was seriously injured in 2019, the nearest hospital was 370 kilometers away. The ambulance took 6 hours to arrive. By then, the station manager had already driven him 180 kilometers to meet the ambulance halfway. You have freedom from regulation. You also have freedom from emergency services, healthcare access, and basic infrastructure. Wilcannia is different from the remote stations. It is a town with 745 people, schools, and services. But it has experienced such severe administrative breakdown that normal regulatory functions have ceased. State government intervention followed, but service delivery remains fractured. Building inspections stopped, business compliance monitoring ended. Regulatory enforcement became non-existent. You can operate here with remarkable freedom simply because the administrative capacity to govern has disintegrated. This is not frontier remoteness. This is institutional failure creating accidental freedom. A resident renovated his entire house, including structural changes, without permits over 3 years. No inspections, no compliance checks, because there is nobody employed to do them. But the cost is visible everywhere. Roads are failing, water infrastructure is aging. Youth unemployment exceeds 40%. The freedom you gain from absent regulation is offset by absent services, absent opportunity, and absent hope. Number 3, Maralinga Tablelands, the nuclear testing ground. Nobody governs between 1953 and 1963. The British conducted nuclear weapons tests at Maralinga in South Australia. The land was returned to traditional owners in 1984, creating one of Australia's most unusual administrative territories. This is restricted land with minimal government presence. Access requires permits from traditional owners, not government. And within the permitted zones, you operate under agreements with indigenous governance, not state regulations. One mining exploration company found that working here meant negotiating with traditional owners directly. Government regulatory frameworks still technically apply, but practical authority rests with the Land Council. This creates spaces where standard Australian governance is filtered through indigenous decision-making structures that operate differently. Faster in some ways, more relationship-based. Less focused on written compliance, more on negotiated outcomes. But you're working in land contaminated by plutonium with radiation risks that will persist for 24,000 years. Freedom from conventional regulation comes with literal radioactive consequences. Number 2, the islands of Torres Strait. Where two countries overlap, the Torres Strait Islands sit between Queensland and Papua New Guinea. They are Australian territory, but the border is complicated and governance is unique. Traditional owners maintain connections across international boundaries that predate both nations. Movement, trade, and activity happen according to customary law that does not align with federal regulations. There are families living here who operate fishing businesses, conduct trade, and manage property using traditional protocols. Government regulations exist on paper. In practice, enforcement is limited and often deferred to traditional authority structures. One islander explained it simply. The government makes rules in Canberra. We live by island rules. When they conflict, island rules win because nobody from Canberra is coming here to argue. You have freedom from southern regulation, but you also live in cyclone territory with limited economic opportunities and youth migration draining every community. The young people leave, the old ones stay, and the islands slowly empty. Number 1, the Simpson Desert crossing, the only true lawless territory. The Simpson Desert is Australia's last truly ungoverned space. Not because laws do not apply, but because enforcement is impossible. This is 176,000 square kilometers of sand dunes where people disappear for weeks. No cell coverage, no police presence, no emergency services. You enter with supplies, satellite communication, and the knowledge that if something goes wrong, rescue might not arrive in time. Adventurers cross illegally outside permitted seasons. Mining exploration happens in gray areas. Activities occur that would trigger intervention anywhere else, but here, there is simply nobody watching. One group spent 19 days crossing without seeing another human. No permits, no check-ins, no authority, just sand, sky, and complete autonomy. This is the ultimate freedom. You answer to nobody because there is nobody to answer to. But people die here. Regularly, in 2021, a solo traveler was found deceased after his vehicle became stuck. He had been dead for 8 days before anyone noticed he was missing. You want freedom? The Simpson Desert is absolute freedom. Freedom from rules, freedom from safety nets, and freedom from the assumption that someone will save you. The freedom nobody wants. We have covered 10 forgotten territories where government oversight ranges from minimal to non-existent. But here is what the freedom fantasy misses. These places are free because nobody wants them. The government is not oppressing Coober Pedy, it is abandoning it. Regulations are not absent because of libertarian philosophy. They are absent because enforcement costs more than the territory generates in tax revenue. You can buy a house in Wilcannia for $50,000 and live without building permits. But you will also live without functioning infrastructure, without economic opportunity, and without the services that regulations are meant to protect. The question is not whether freedom exists in these territories, it does. The question is whether you can afford the price. Because freedom from government means freedom from government services. And that trade-off is harsher than most people imagine. These are Australia's forgotten territories, places where freedom still exists. But now you know why most Australians choose regulations instead.